Hi, welcome back to another edition of Inside Great Lakes Sailing. My name is Greg Norman, your host. Probably don't remember the name Sandy Douglas, but if you go back to the turn of the last century, you would find that Sandy Douglas is one of the great boat designers of his era. He was credited with building the Thistle, the Flying Scot, and eventually the Highlander. We had a chance last week to talk to the Andrews, who own the Flying Scot company, and we talked a lot about Sandy Douglas, and this week will be no exception. Crescent Sail Yacht Club is hosting the Women and Junior Nationals for Thistles sail racing on June 17th, 18th, and 19th on Lake St. Clair. And we thought we would explore a little bit about Sandy Douglas, some folks who actually built the boat for the last 20 years, and kind of talk about what Gary Jobson calls the Thistle cult. It was really interesting the last few weeks to learn about the boat, the way it sails, how Sandy Douglas' mind worked. And we thought we would take you inside the sport and the boat specifically, because it's coming to Crescent. There's big fleets. About 4,100 boats have been built. And again, last week we did the Flying Scot show. We just thought this would be interesting. So first up, we're going to talk to Gary Jobson, obviously one of the most renowned sailors in U.S. history. Then we get a chance to talk to Doug Labor, who is the owner and the former Thistle builder for Great Midwest Yacht Company. And he talks a little bit about how he got involved in sailing and then essentially building the boats, and actually talked a little bit about the redesign. Now, if you happen to be coming to Crescent for the Thistle race, you might want to talk with Michelle Scrigetti, and we'll have the information will be up here if you're looking for a place to stay. Crescent wants to be a great host, but we hope you learn something about Thistles, because the more I dug into this and uncovered a little bit about Sandy Douglas and about the folks who sail the Thistle. I walk by Thistles every day on my way to my boat at our club, and it's an extraordinary fleet of individuals who sail a boat they truly love. So we'll be back with Gary in a second, and right after that, we'll talk a little bit to Doug about what it was like to build the boats. So stay tuned. Welcome back. We're with one of the most renowned sailors in the history of the sport. We get a chance to talk about something other than Gary and his sailing. Gary, we're doing a whole thing on Thistles for this week. We have the Nationals for women and juniors coming to Lake St. Clair. In 2020, you were lucky enough to, or granted the opportunity to talk a little bit about Gordon Sandy Douglas. Sandy Douglas designed the Thistle. And I just thought we'd kind of talk to you a little bit about it, because like I said, you were the one that wrote all the information for his induction. And maybe talk briefly about his start. And I think the easiest thing to start with is that he was really mentored and sort of influenced by a guy by the name of Eufa Fox. And my follow-up is, you got to tell me what a sailing canoe is, for those of us who don't have a clue.
All right. Well, Sandy Douglas, as you say, Gordon Sandy K. Douglas, lived a long life from 1904 to 1992. So he was 88 years old. And Eufa Fox was a great British sailor, designer, wrote about it. I have a collection, hardbound copy, 6 volumes of all of Eufa Fox's works. And he was an extraordinary guy. And I think Sandy Douglas was quite influenced by Eufa Fox. And Eufa Fox later in his life taught Prince Charles how to sail, and was very close with the Duke of Edinburgh, the Queen's husband. And I think he got a lot of influence from that. And he went on to Dartmouth College, graduated in 1926. And so he was an Ivy Leaguer and had spent some time in England. And then he got intrigued by designing boats. And there's three of note, all with Scottish names. And the Thistle, as you point out, great three-person boat. He had the Highlander and he had the Flying Scot. And the beauty of the Thistle is it certainly has stood the test of time. Now, he also did the sailing canoe, which I think was an attempt to take a canoe and put a sail on it. And of course, it had no stability and you'd get wet fast and something like that. But Uffa Fox was playing with that. And really what he was trying to do is get people out on the water. So, you don't have to paddle that thing. You could put a sail on it. And then, of course, it evolved from there and had all kinds of contraptions with hiking boards over the side. And anyway, that was something in the Depression era that they tried to do. But it really was the Thistle class that stood Sandy Douglas apart, and probably the main reason that the Hall of Fame selection committee inducted him into the Hall of Fame, which was, a very well-deserved honor, to say the least.
You went to Dartmouth. Was his background in engineering or design, nautical design of any kind?
No. Dartmouth is not known. You go to MIT or Webb Institute or University of Michigan for naval architecture. But yes, he was into engineering, but not naval architecture. No, I think he started as a lark, and Uffa Fox got him going with it. And then, of course, he went on his own. And he had this concept that he wanted you to be able to build the boat yourself. And look, this was a time where people didn't have much money. I'm not sure how much money we have today, but at that time, they didn't have any money. And, the Thistle was a little bit of a complicated boat to build, but people could do it. And they were inexpensive. And you could sail with three. So they became a great family boat, a husband and wife and a kid, or, a parent with a couple of kids on board. It worked out really well. And it's a good size, 17-foot boat.
You allude to the fact that the 30s and 40s were kind of dark times, and sort of sail racing for the masses started to become a little more popular. Was that important to have smaller boats, affordable smaller boats? So
yeah, there are two parts of it: affordable smaller boats, but also the concept of one design boat, where you were really testing the skill of the sailor more than the design of the boat. We think of the America's Cup, which of course is the ultimate naval architectural contest, to say the least. But he wanted boats to be even. And, other boats that he didn't do, Philip Rhodes did the Penguin, for example, designed that in 1938. And that was a home-built kit and very popular as well. So that was an era where one design, affordable, family-type competition, all amateur, everything. And, the other thing about Sandy Douglas is he was actually a pretty darn good sailor himself. So he could take his knowledge of sailing and say, here's what would make a good boat.
He won 5 Thistle National Championships, 7 Flying Scot National Championships. So obviously the guy could sail.
Well, you got to keep in mind, he was probably trying to sell boats at the same time. So
right.
Winning helped him sell boats. A little bit like the Buddy Melgas would be somewhat analogous. Buddy, of course, came a little bit later in time. But Buddy would win races and people say, I want one of those boats. With Sandy Douglas, he probably sold his boat right after he won. But he was trying to sell boats. And he helped get the class going too, which is something that, naval architects and builders sometimes forget, that half of it is producing the boat in the first place, but the second half is marketing it and get people to sail. And one of the things that he did was create a nifty newsletter called the Bagpipe. Good name for a Scotsman, to say the least, the Bagpipe. And but that got people engaged, and it came out regularly, and I think that helped get the class going and established. And the fact that the Thistle is still raced today speaks volumes. That, I mean, this is an enduring class that just hit the right nerve chord. And, so Sandy left quite a good legacy.
Gary, speak to the love of, you've raced Thistles. Talk a little bit about the boat and its uniqueness to maybe somebody who doesn't understand racing. And I'm a perfect example. What is it what I would like about that boat?
Well, it's a relatively small boat. It's only 17 feet long. And they're a little bit of a handful. They're a big open cockpit dinghy. So you can capsize and you can get wet. So you got to be careful. But it's a 3-person crew. And there's lots of women that race in these boats. You want to get the right combination of weight. The boats are fast upwind and they're very fast downwind. Surprisingly fast. They have a spinnaker, so good teamwork and crew work's really important. And the thing I liked about it is it's a very tactical boat. You can tack quickly and easily or jibe quickly. So every little wind shift, you can make a maneuver and take advantage of it. So the combination of pretty fast, very maneuverable, tactical, and then, and Sandy was a master of this, just the slightest little tweaks and tuning would make a big difference in speed. And he had that formula down. And of course, he talked about it in the bagpipe, and people would read that thing. Oh, what did Sandy have to say? And then I'll get my shrouds exactly like that. Of course, then he would tweak it to something that even fine-tune it a little bit more.
The Flying Scot, which came about 10 years after the Thistle invention, was really kind of designed for maybe a larger audience, maybe a little bit slower boat, a little easier to sail. Was that obviously done on purpose, but he was that master guy that would sort of find the niche that he needed to work through.
Well, one of the big differences with the Flying Scot is that you're not going to capsize so easily, and it had more of a deck on it and maybe a little bit more comfortable boat. The Thistle's got a very narrow rail to put your hiney on. It's a little bit of a workout hiking out on that boat, where the Flying Scot's got a lot wider deck to sit on. So maybe he had some older people in mind for that boat. I'm not sure. Maybe he was getting older. And it's called the Flying Scot. I don't think it's quite as quick relative to his size as the Thistle, but it's a nice boat. I've raced Flying Scots too.
The Thistle community, having done this story now the last couple of weeks, the Thistle community seems more, I don't know what the word is, crazy about their boat.
Yeah, they're cold.
Okay, that's called.
And one of the things that speaks well is you have a broad range of sailors. Tom Hubble, who came after me as president of U.S. Sailing, and Tom, I wanted to say, is maybe 73 now or 74. He was racing in the Nationals a couple of weeks ago. I saw him in the middle of the fleet there, and I read up on him. And so you get people in their mid-70s racing, and then you get 12 and 14-year-old kids crewing on these boats. So it's not only stood the test of time, but it attracts a wide range of age, where, the sport that you coach, everybody's all within 3 or 4 years of each other, right?
Right. Well, that makes sense. Last question, and this is just sort of as I walk to my boat through our club, the Crescent, the Thistles are in a group, and then the Jays are in a group, and the Flying Scots are in a group. The only boats that have covers on the sides and covers on the top and covers every place, but seem to be the Thistles. They seem to dress up their boats. So my question is there something about the wood and or fiberglass that you have to protect more than other boats, or is that just one of those sort of cult-like ideas that you're trying to make?
Well, sun is tough on wood, and sun is tough on fiberglass. But these are, people treat these boats like an antique car. This is a Ferrari or an older Porsche, and there's a lot of varnish that goes on in the older wooden boats, so they want to take care of it. Hence the covers, and you don't just go driving on a trailer with this. You put a cover underneath it because you don't want any pebbles coming up from the road and dinging the bottom of the boat.
Okay.
So the fact that people care so much about the boat speaks volumes. And winning's important, by the way.
Yeah, no, it is.
They're all friendly on land at the cocktail party, but they do want to win those races.
Does wood matter versus fiberglass in these boats, or are they pretty much the same?
You'd have to ask the national champion. I have to think that the boats are fairly even, but wood does absorb moisture as time goes on and they get heavier. So you're probably better off with a fiberglass boat these days.
Okay. Well, listen, I appreciate your time. We're going to add this. Doug Labor is going to be on after this interview. Doug built the boat for the last 20 years in the great Midwest.
Ask him that question.
I will. I plan to. He had an interesting question, too, because he was a guy who was an engineer who ended up going sailing with a friend who owned a Thistle. He wanted to go into business for himself and ended up owning the company. Well, there's a whole other story.
Here's the way to ask Doug the question. Are the wooden boats still competitive with the fiberglass boats today?
Okay.
See how he answers that.
That sounds cool. Gary, as always.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time.
And
hopefully
your show.
Hopefully we'll see you out in Chicago.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Want to thank Gary Jobson for coming aboard a little bit and talking about Sandy Douglas and what he meant to sail design and a little bit about Thistles. And when Sandy Douglas was inducted to the United National Sailing Hall of Fame in 2020, Gary was the gentleman that wrote the eulogy about Sandy and his induction ceremony information that's posted on the website. Up next is Doug Labor, and I think you'll find that to be a very interesting discussion. Welcome back to the show. My name is Greg Norman. We're lucky enough to have with us Doug Labor, who is one of the great thistle builders of the last 25 or 30 years. Doug, we're going to talk about Thistles today, and your story is really unique. Gary Jobson was just on the show talking about Sandy Douglas. And first of all, thank you for taking the time out to join us and have a conversation. As you know, the Thistles are coming to Crescent Sail Yacht Club in Lake St. Clair for the National Women's and Juniors Championship, the 17th, 18th, and 19th of June. So that's why we want to talk a little bit about Thistles here on the show. So thanks for coming aboard.
Looking forward to it.
Doug, I want to start in the very beginning. And you kind of got into this whole deal kind of, I don't want to say by mistake, but certainly by happenstance.
That is true. How much of that story do you want?
Go ahead, just start.
I had never sailed before, even though my home was Milwaukee. I came to Columbus after getting an engineering degree, worked for a large research organization here in Columbus called Battelle, B. Battelle. A boss of mine bought himself a little sailboat called a Thistle. And that was nice, and I heard about it, and that was where it was. I got a call one Sunday morning. He needed a crew for that day's race. And my response was, sailing club, crew, sailboats? Yeah, okay, I'll be there. I had no idea what to expect. So I showed up, and he walked me through all sorts of systems, lots and lots and lots of words, Cunningham and boom bang and centerboard control and main sheet, jib sheet and rudder and tiller and centerboard. And yeah, okay, what am I getting into? So, and then his wife got a hold of me and started talking about the spinnaker. So then it got funner than there. So jumped on the boat, pushed off from the dock, and I was just enraptured. I mean, the experience it's still fresh in my mind. We pushed away from the dock. We were going dead downwind. I turned around to look at the dock, and no noise, no nothing. We all know that. And just watched it recede rapidly from the boat, or obviously us moving away from the dock. Wow, this is neat. So we sailed the race, have no remembrance of how we did. Came back in, thought I had expressed all the proper words. Somehow they didn't register or they weren't expressed well. Sometime later, I talked with my boss and I said, hey, I'd like to do some more. Well, the sailing season was over. He put me in touch with a fellow who had just moved to Columbus from Cleveland. He had been racing for years. He was the VP of a small company, and he was looking for a crew for his Thistle. He had three daughters, 8, 10, and 12, and obviously the eldest of the three were going to be the crew. So that meant that Chuck, daughter, and I were going to be on the crew. And so we'll sail, we'll see what happens. So we got together, we sailed, we did very, very, very well. Chuck was an extremely good, competent sailor, marvelous gentleman. Took plenty of time to teach and explain, and we did a lot of practicing. And so we sailed together for several years. Had the great fortune of winning the Nationals 4 years after that. Met, of course, a great number of very, very smart, respectable, intelligent, competitive, like-minded people. So that kind of tucked away. Also had the absolutely wonderful opportunity to meet a couple of people who were looking at the future of thistling. The two major builders at that time were not doing very well. One of them was turning out boats not very good quality. The other major builder was in the midst of a lawsuit with the Thistle Class Association. And obviously when one sues one customer base, we don't have to go down that road. So there was an opportunity. Right. So this chap, Bob by name, was interested in getting into the thistle building business. So we talked about it. We agreed that we would contract with a new fiberglass startup boat building company in northern Wisconsin. We would buy hulls from him. We would put the wood on it. We would put our name on the boat. We hadn't developed a name yet. We would take it and deliver it. This chap turned out to be unreliable as being kind. We drove from Columbus to northern Wisconsin. He ordered 3 boats. We went to pick them up. We got to that location. He didn't have 3 boats done. He didn't have 2 boats done. He didn't have 1 boat done. No call, no notice. So we came back and we waited for him. He eventually brought boats down to us. We had meanwhile decided that we were not going to continue with him, but we had committed to doing something with thistles. My personal background was, to go back to that, I was trained as an engineer. I was at Patel, as I mentioned, and gradually developed the understanding that I was not a corporate guy. Corporate was a whole bunch of yes, sir, because I say so. Don't ask, just do it. That was not where I was. I was much more a cause and effect kind of a guy. My skipper was the VP of a small company. So I started seriously looking at small companies. Looked around within Battelle, found that I could learn a little more about business because I knew nothing about business at that time. Engineers aren't trained in business. And moved within Battelle to be a contracts negotiator. So learned to do estimating and negotiate and talk figures. So that's kind of how I got at it.
So
Back to you.
Some from that, the great Midwestern yacht company starts.
Had the opportunity to work with a young chap who was extremely talented at woodworking, Larry Liggett by name, who was in Columbus temporarily. The other chap who I was going to start the business with basically left the company or left the possible startup. Larry and I had decided we were going to do something. Battelle and I were coming apart. And so we took one of the boats that we had got from this chap in northern Wisconsin, fared it up. I took some of my engineering thinking and went back and did some redesign on the interior, got rid of the sharp corners on the tanks, which were prone to fail, 6,522 flexes, and got rid of the tanks and rounded them, got rid of the other corner, major corner, which is where the crossthwart entered the seat. So redesigned the seat tanks. Had the opportunity to work with a company who had just started in Columbus. They were sailors. They had started a fiberglass company to build foreign car body parts. So we talked one day, and they agreed that they would do the glass work for us. They would build a new molds for us. They would do the glass work for us. We, meanwhile, would develop a shop and do the woodwork. So that's kind of how we started.
So Doug, you've been building Thistles since 1975. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
One of the terms that Gary Jobson used about the class was that it was almost cult-like. And from what I've seen at our own club, there's a very ravenous group of people that love their boats. If you obviously have found the same in your now 40-year career of building boats, maybe talk briefly about what the clientele is like.
The 98% of the people are intelligent, respectful, challenge-driven, most enjoy maintaining the boats. The Thistle is unique in the total one design world today in that it has a lot of wood on it. And a lot of people who get into the Thistle do so because of wood. Let me back up a step. The earliest Thistles, of course, were molded plywood. So they're still actively competing today. One of the things about the Thistle, I'm digressing a bit, is that it's a very lightweight, heavily canvassed boat. So it performs very, very well in light to medium air. You may have in some of your other contacts and discussions heard the story about Sandy sailing his first boat and beating everybody by a lot. You have that story in your pile of stuff.
Yeah. And we're talking about Sandy Douglas, who was the original designer of the Thistle, along with the Flying Scot in the Highlanders. So you picked a good boat in which to build your career on, certainly.
Absolutely, and have enjoyed 72.5%. Like every business, there are non-fun things. But dealing with the people in general is just enjoyable. Suppliers, of course, range all over the map from, again, most of them are small business, and so they understand the ins and outs of not having to go through corporate stuff, and have had a great time.
Doug, when you have a one design boat like the Thistle, and you make a modification, are there rules within the Thistle or U.S. sailing that change? And then the other question is there patent issues that you have to worry about, or is the fact that you're just building the boat to the one design class that's be able to race against each other?
Well, let's see. You asked, I think, 3 questions. First of all, as far as trademark patents, no. The class association owns the rights to the Thistle name, the Thistle emblem, has published a set of plans and drawings, and the boat has to meet all of the dimensions and other tolerances, weight tolerances, for example.
Okay.
There are what do I want to say? There are tolerances within that. So we have, for example, a minimum weight, 515 pounds, all up, which means, by the way, that the Thistle is the lightest of the boats that Sandy designed.
And the fastest, probably.
And by far and away the fastest. It'll plane in a 12-knot breeze.
Wow.
So,
do you still sail?
I wound up crewing this last weekend, in fact. Most of my time on these boats has been spent as a crew. I've done a little bit of skippering, had varied success, like a lot of skippers. But most of my time is spent on the boats crewing. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I wound up crewing with a junior, 13 years old, and working together. And among other things, he and I talked a little bit about him developing a command voice, just for stuff.
Yeah. Does it sound right? About 4,200 Thistles have been built there. Does that number sound correct?
To be equivalent, 4,100, but
okay.
Yeah, you're close.
So how many of those did you build?
We probably have done, well, let me do it kind of from a background point of view. There have been, since we started, there have been roughly 600 boats built. I would say that the other builders, and this is an estimate because I've never really pursued getting a hard number, but I'm guessing that the other builders, most of whom were short-lived, probably built 200. So that would say we are nominally 400. And so 400 plus or minus something.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time in the fiberglass shop, bending over a mold, getting stinky with polyester resin. It's one of the reasons I got out of the glass business, because that stopped being fun. Still did most, if not all, of the woodwork on the boat. Still build masts and booms and do all of the hardware and roll the boat up so we can put bailers in the bottom, that sort of thing.
You still have a very vibrant parts and refitting and fixing boats, fixing Thistles. Am I correct down there near Columbus?
Absolutely. We are the only builder of the mast and the booms. We are one of 2 rudder suppliers. We are one of 2 centerboard suppliers. I have designed several fittings for the boats. We still offer most of the parts that one would need. So if you next week were to go out and buy a Thistle that had been in a garage for 50 years and it had the original rigging, and you said, send me a package, we could do that.
Wow. I guess the last question, what is it that you like about the boats, not only from a design standpoint, but just really from a functional sailing standpoint?
Oh, the boat is just a tremendously active boat, very responsive. And again, it's hard to separate the boat from the people, because the people resemble the boats in a number of ways. In that it's competitive and quick, if you can talk about quick people. I guess one more thing I would like to add to these comments is that I am doing for a living what a lot of people retire to. I mean, when I have a chance to work on wood, so I'm cutting, I'm fitting, I'm sanding, I'm finishing. I mean, that's what some number of the people that are going to listen to this at some point are going to say, geez, I'm going to retire and do that. Well, I'm doing it pretty much daily, and it's been a great journey.
One real quick question. What's the hours? How many hours is it? Have you figured out how many hours it takes to build a Thistle from start to finish?
We're probably talking 180 or 90.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Well, listen, Doug, I appreciate the time for us to talk to us. Like I said, the Nationals and the for women and juniors are coming to Crescent week after next, and we just wanted to get a chance to talk a little bit about somebody who had built the boat. We've talked to somebody who inducted Sandy Douglas, and I've learned more about Sandy Douglas in the last probably 2.5 weeks than I ever thought I'd know about Sandy Douglas. But he was a really cool guy, and from everything that we've read, this is going to be hopefully be a fun show.
Terrific. Well, good talking.
Appreciate your time.
I want to thank Gary Jobson. It's always a treat to talk to him. He's just such a good guy. And we also want to thank Doug Labor, who came aboard to talk a little bit about what it's like to build Thistles. If you don't get a chance to get in one of the Thistles, then certainly take a look at the race, and we'll try hopefully bring you some coverage of that event. And we hope you learn something about Sandy Douglas and a little bit about sailing history. And we'll try to hit another story for next week. So for all the guys in back, we appreciate you watching Inside Great Lakes Sailing. I'm Greg Norman, your host. We'll see you next week.